Hey, what's up everyone? In today's video using Power Automate Desktop, we are going to merge two Excel files into one. We are going to set variables, we are going to loop through folders, we are going to convert date time to text, and at the end, we will upload the file into SharePoint Online. So let's do this. First, let's have a look at the files we're going to work with. In my C drive, under the VLPAD demo, I have a template file. This is the file we're going to use to write the data from the two other files that we're going to rename and that we're going to upload into SharePoint. And in that file, I only have headers. I have another folder under my C drive, VL inventory files, and those are the two files that we are going to combine into the template file. And those two files have the same headers and some data. So here I have 5 rows, so 5 computers. And on the phones, I have 3 rows, so 3 phones. Then I also have a SharePoint site with a document library called RPA Docs. And this is where we are going to upload the new file. In Power Automate Desktop, we are going to start by setting some variables. What I also want to do, but it's not mandatory, it's to write some comments. Now let's do a search for variables and drag it into the canvas. The first variable is going to be the path for our new file. I'm going to rename that variable. And I'm going to be setting the file into the same location as the template. But you can choose whatever path you wish. And then I'm going to click Save. Our second variable is going to be the template file path itself. I'm going to rename that as template file. And put the path in here. And our last variable is going to be the file path where those two files currently are. All right, next we're going to get the current date and time. And this is because we're going to add this value at the end of our new file. Because we are uploading to SharePoint, in case you didn't know, SharePoint cannot have two files with the same name and the same extension. In our case, let's imagine that we are uploading a file every day. In that case, we can just use the date value. But if you are uploading the same file multiple times a day, you would want to add the time as well, because in that case, that would make the file unique. And we have an action which is called get current date and time. We can choose if we want the current date and time or if we want the current date only. In our case, we're just going to choose the current date only. I'm not going to change the time zone, and the variable that is going to be produced is current date time. Next, we want to convert that date time into text. And there's an action just for that as well. That action is called convert date time to text. Just going to drag it over the Canva. The date time to convert is going to be our variable from above. So we click on the X to access the variables, select the current date time, click on select. We can choose a format. And in our case, we're going to choose custom. I'm personally in the UK, so I'm going to choose a certain format, which is going to be the day, the month, and then the year. This format for the month is going to give us the 3 letters from the month, the first 3 letters, but we can also add another capital M, and that will be the full month. Once we're happy, we just have to click on Save, and it's going to be time to move into the template file. I'm going to add another comment. And we're going to start thinking as to what we want to do with that template file. First step, we want to open Excel. We also want to rename the worksheet. Again, this is not mandatory, but why not? And then we want to make sure that we are on the right cell to start writing into that file. So let's launch Excel first. We have a template, so we're going to choose Open the following document. Click on the X for the variable, and the path we are interested in here is our template file. Usually we do not make the instance visible, but just for this demo, we want to see what's going on, so I'm going to leave it on. And we do not want to set this file as read-only because we want to write into it. Click on Save. Then we are going to rename the worksheet. And we can see that our Excel instance is named Excel Instance. Now, if we think ahead, we are going to open multiple files at the same time. So we are going to make a slight change. We're going to cancel that action. I'm going to double click on the Launch Excel action, and I'm going to change the name of the variable that it's producing. I'm simply going to add template at the end, so I know which Excel instance we are working with. Now you can see that the name has changed. We want to rename the worksheet by the name from Sheet 1 to a name of your liking. Click on Save. And the next action is going to be about starting writing into that template. So we do not want to hard code any column or rows with, for example, the first column A and row number 2 just after the headers. Because when we're going to start looping through the files and write into that template, then we do not want to go back to A2 all the time. So we need to grab the action, which is called Get First 3 Column Row from the Excel worksheet. Our Excel instance is the Excel instance template. And again, I'm going to change the variables just to make sure we know what we're working with. I'm just adding template at the end. Okay, so we are done with the template file. The next step is grabbing the 2 files and loop through each of those. We're going to get the files in folder. The folder, we saved that before as a variable, and we called it inventory files root path. For the file filter, we're not going to filter anything, so we're going to leave the star or the wildcard because we want to grab all those files. We do not have any subfolder, and for the variable, I'm going to change that again to inventory files. At this stage, we are going to save the flow and run the flow so we can see the output of the variables. And if we look at the inventory files, we have our 2 files. This is going to be an array where we have the first item under 0 and the second item under the number 1. If we click on More, you can see at the top that we have our variable, square brackets, and then 0 for the first item. And we can also see that we have some properties that we're going to use later. The full name, the name or the extension, and we have a bit more after that. Now it's time to grab the data from those files and paste everything into the template file. And for that, we're going to use a for each loop. And the value to iterate is going to be all the inventory files. So we're going to grab our variable and click on Select. And the item in the loop would be represented with the variable current item. So for me, it makes sense. I'm not going to change that variable. I'm just going to click on Save. And now we need to think about everything we need to do for a single file. And those actions will be repeated for the second file. So first, we need to launch Excel with that file. And we put that right into the for each loop. We want to open a specific document. And this time, the document path is going to be the current item with the full name. So we expand the current item. And if we scroll back up, we have the full name of the document. We select the property and we click on Select. We're not going to change any of those parameters, but if we scroll down, we're going to change again the name of the variable, because this time, this is the Excel instance of the file itself. And click on Save. Next, we want to get the first 3 column and first 3 row because that will be the limit to what we want to copy into the template file. So we have this action in here that we used for the template file. So instead of just doing a search and grabbing that again, we can just copy that. Select it, Control C, and then go somewhere else, Control V. So it will be outside of the loop. We're just going to drag it over into the loop and simply edit the name of the variables in here. So the Excel instance is going to be the file one. We can also select it from here and send from those variables. Once we do this, we know where the limit is going to be. So basically we are outside of the data because we are on the first free column, which will be the next column after the end of the data, and same for the row. What we want to do now is starting to grab the data. So basically we know that the data starts at column A and row number 2. So we are going to put our cursor on A2. Our Excel instance is going to be the instance file, and we want to specify a cell. So our column is going to be A, and the row is going to be 2. And if I open the file, then this is where we are going to be. Column A, row number 2. I'm going to expand that a bit. And what we want to copy is from A2 to H6. But we're not going to hard code those values, because even though we might know that we start in here, we don't know exactly where we are going to finish. We don't know how many rows. We don't know necessarily how many columns. So I'm going to close that, and we are going to copy cells from Excel worksheet. The instance is going to be the file instance. For the copy mode, if we expand the drop down, we have obviously multiple options. What we are interested in here is the values from a range of cells. The start column is going to be A. The start row is going to be 2. And if we scroll down, where do we want to end? We want to end at the first free column. So if I open the file again, the first free column is going to be column I, but we want column H in here because we want to stop at this column. So we're going to choose our variable, which was the first free column from the file, highlight it, click on select, and we want one before this. So go into the percentage sign, and we're going to do a -1 because we want the column before the free column. We do the same for the row. Go into the X for the variables, the first free row for the file, and again, we're going to do a -1. So let's save the flow and run the flow to see where we are. If we open the phones file, we can see that the last step that we had was to copy the cells from the worksheet. And this is exactly what it's doing here. We've selected from A2 until the first free column -1, which is column H, and same for the row. So our data is currently being copied. Now we need to move on to the next step, which is going to be to move into the template file so we can paste that data. So let's put another comment. And now it's time to switch to the template file. And once again, we want to set our active cell into that template file. The Excel instance is going to be our template instance. We want to activate a specific cell. The column is going to be column A, because in our case, that is our first column. And then for the row, it's going to be the first free row of the template. This is going to be row number 2, because remember that this template has no data in it, just the headers. Once we are on the correct cell, we want to paste the values. Again, the Excel instance is going to be the template. We want to paste on a specific cell. The column is going to be column A. And again, the row is going to be the first free row. And then click on Save. The next action we're going to insert before testing our flow is going to be sending keys, because once everything is copied, we just want to deselect everything so we can paste the data from the second file. So there's an action for sending keys. For the send keys to, we're going to choose the Windows instance. The Excel instance that we are going to be targeting is going to be our template, because that's where the data has been pasted. And for the keys, we simply want to send the down key. We are only sending one key, but we can change that. We're going to put 3. This is in milliseconds. We're going to scroll down a bit, and then we're going to send the text as the hardware key. All right, let's run the flow to see what's happening. I'm going to save it. And remember what I said at the beginning, we had 3 rows for the phones and 5 rows for the computers. So let's run it. And look what's happening in here. We are in the template file, okay? And we have 3 phones, but we only have 2 computers. And the reason why we have only 2 computers, it's because we went for the computer first. So we have those 5 rows. And then when we went into the phones file, it just wrote over again. So that's why the phones are the first 3 in that template file. So we need to do a couple of more steps to make sure that the data is entered properly one after the other. So I'm going to close those files. And what we need to do here to make sure that the data is one after the other, once the first file has been copied, so let's say those 3 phones, we once again need to grab the first 3 row and the first 3 column to make sure that when we loop through the second file, this is where the data is starting to be written. So again, we could do a search, or we could simply grab one of the actions that we have. Control C, click somewhere else, Control V, and then we put that into the loop. And we want to change this because whatever is happening in the template file. So we want to change that to the template file. And then once we have this 3 column and this 3 row after the first run, after the first file, we want to activate that cell. Excel instance is going to be the template. Once again, we want to specify a cell. The cell is going to be column A. And for the row, we want the first 3 row. Then we just have to click on Save. And let's run to see if we have our 3 phones and 5 computers row. And as you can see, this time it worked. We had our first file, which was the computers file. We've pasted the 5 values. Then we made sure that we knew the first 3 row and the first 3 column again. So we can activate that cell to be able to paste the values from the second run. And that was for the phones file. Now we only have to do a little bit of housekeeping. And the last bit is to upload this file into SharePoint Online. I'm going to close those files. And that's exactly the action we're going to add now, which is closing the Excel files. The instance is going to be the file instance. And again, because those are individual files, we don't need to save anything from them. And now we are going to work on this template file, which is still open, and we're going to work outside of the loop. We're done with the loop now. Let's put a comment. And what would actually be nice is just to resize the columns, for example. We have an action which is called resize columns and rows. The instance is our template. The target is the column. The range is going to be everything that's available. And we simply want to auto-fit everything. Now we are going to close that file because we want to upload it into SharePoint. Instance is the template, and we want to save that document now because we have all the new data from the other files. So we're going to choose Save the Document As. We're going to keep the default extension. And now for the path, we are going to combine the folder path, the new name we want to give that document, and we're going to append the date at the end of the file name. And that is the reason why we've set those variables at the beginning, because now we can just use them again. So let's close this for a second and let's go back to our variable in here. We need the final report path. We need to give it a name. We need to type that manually. And then we want the formatted datetime variable. Let's choose the variable, select the final report, then put the cursor in here and we're going to type the name of the file. So let's say that inventory final report is going to be our name. We're going to put an underscore after that. Again, you can put a dash, you can put nothing if you want to, but because we're going to add the date now, it's going to look a little bit better. And then again, we're going to go into variable and we want the formatted datetime. And now we can click on save. I have another video that I made where I was uploading a file to SharePoint, so it's going to appear on the top right corner. So check it out if you need to know exactly the ins and outs on how to upload a file to SharePoint. But basically what we need to do is first we need to convert the file into binary data, and then we need to use the create file action. Under the file action, we have the convert file to binary data. And our file path is going to be the exact same thing that we had when we are actually closing Excel and saving the document. But this time we need to put the extension as well. We just need to add the extension to this. And the variable that's produced is called binary data. I'm just going to leave it as it is, and we're going to use it right after. Click on save, and then we need to create the file. And under SharePoint, we have create file. Now, like Power Automate, when you see a diamond, this means that this is a premium connector, but just something to be aware of. If you've never used the SharePoint connector or the OneDrive connector, then you will need to create a connection reference, but that's a one-off action. I'm going to select my SharePoint site. The folder path is going to be first the library, and then any folder. If I want to put my file into a specific folder or subfolder, you would have to insert the full path in here. But I'm just going to put it at the root of my document library. However, if we look at the SharePoint site, what I've done here is I've just added a small complexity here, just to show you what Power Automate Desktop is actually expecting. If you look at the top, when I created my document library, I've created with a space, and we can see that with the %20 in the URL. However, if you look at the name of the document library, there is no space in there. And if we go back into Power Automate Desktop, I'm going to need to have a / and then type RPA docs with the space. This is not the display name that you can see where I had no space. But also note that there is no double quotes. Even if there's a space, we do not insert double quotes. The file name, this is going to be the name that I want in SharePoint with the extension. And the file content, we need to click on the X for the variables. And that is going to be the binary data from our previous step. And if we click on save, now we're done. So let's save the flow. And let's run it to see if the file is uploaded to SharePoint. Let's have a look into SharePoint. I'm going to refresh. And now the file has been uploaded. So it's been a longer video than I usually do, but I thought it was actually important to see a step-by-step process and try to take the time to explain exactly how things are working out. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more.